Can you hear me now? Hi there folks, welcome back to the channel. So today we're going to start with what will hopefully be the first of a series of videos called Watch Me Edit. Each week I'm going to dig out an old photo that I've taken over the past 6 years and I'm going to re-edit it applying what I know now. I'll talk a little bit about each shoot as I go, but the focus will actually be on the edit rather than the shoot itself. So for this week we have Natasha. This was actually the first time that we worked together and as you can see it got kind of messy. If you're ever thinking about doing a talcum powder shoot or any kind of powder shoot, you've got two options. You could either cover everything in plastic or just don't do it at all because it's incredibly messy. So for this photo, the first thing that I want to do is rotate. So I'm going to control click anywhere on the image, transform, rotate clockwise. Now typically what I would do is go through presets to see if there's any that really fit the image, and I would use that as a jumping off point. But for this one, I know that I want to do a fresh edit from scratch, so won't be using that. What I want to do first is separate the model from the background. When you're in Lightroom, the best way to do this is to use the masking tool, which is the little circle over here on the right. Then click Select Subject, and this will create a mask over the model so that any adjustments made will only affect the subject. So repeat that process again, and then select the top layer. Click on the three dots next to Subject 1 and click Invert. Now your mask will only affect the background of the image. So it's pretty useful. You can clean up the edges of each layer by selecting either the add or the subtract button and then selecting the brush tool and then just going over it to refine them. The mask detection tool does a great job, but I wouldn't rely on it 100% of the time. As you can see, it's missed a few things here. So I'm going to focus on the background to begin with. For this, I think I want the whites to be a bit brighter and the blacks to be even darker. So the first thing I'll do is increase the exposure slightly, then I'll increase the contrast a little. Then I'll do the same with the highlights. Okay, so next I'm going to crush the shadows right down, and then I'm going to leave the whites roughly where they are, and then I will very slightly reduce the blacks. Next I'm going to add a little bit of texture and a little bit of clarity. Then I'm going to adjust the hue to a more green/blue tone. Once that's done, I'm going to sharpen it slightly and then move on to the model layer. So first thing I'm going to do with the model layer is I'm going to increase the exposure so that she's a little bit brighter and stands out a bit more from the background. Then I'm going to bump up the contrast slightly, raise the highlights, reduce the shadows, and same with the blacks. Now I know a lot of people tend to soften a model's skin and reduce the texture, but I tend to prefer some texture and clarity to my images. Okay, now that I'm done with the mask layers, I'm going to make some little adjustments to the overall image. I'm just going through the highlights and shadows until I'm happy. Okay, so I have a wintry look now, but now I want it to look a bit more vintage, like a dated photograph. So I'm going to come down to the curves tool, and I'm going to add a point in the column here, then I'm going to grab this point in the bottom left and drag that up a little. And as you can see, that brings down the contrast in the blacks and gives a more faded film look. Okay, I'm going to bring up the point in the middle here to add a bit more brightness to Natasha because she's looking a bit dull. Next, I'm moving on to colour. Now I want to bring out the hair a little because it's a really nice colour, and looking at the image and moving the sliders, it looks like the main colours will change is red and orange. And as you can see, any adjustments made by the red also impact the face. So I could use the brush to highlight the hair and increase the saturation and highlights and all that, but honestly I just can't be bothered at this point. So instead what I'm going to do is I'm going to increase the reds a little and reduce the saturation of the orange. Then under luminance I'm going to increase both orange and red until I'm happy. Once I'm done, I'm going to move on to the color grade box down here, and really I'm just going to play around until I see something that I like, because it's all subjective at this point. There's no right or wrong way to edit, there's only your style, so play around and find out what that is. Okay, next thing we want to do is we want to remove my foot from this photo. So rather than use the spot removal tool, I'm actually going to use Photoshop and use the clone stamp tool. Personally, I just think it's a lot more accurate. Once that's done in Photoshop, save the image, and as you can see, there's a new file created in Lightroom for our final image. And now we see the before and after. So what do you guys think? Feel free to leave a comment, and if you like this video, please hit like, subscribe, and don't forget to hit that bell icon so that you get notified every time I upload a video. And yeah, until next week, bye. Oh, I'm going to do it.